Hey everyone, I'm Jeff St. Pierre, and this is episode 183 of the Adult Education Podcast. What's the wildest conspiracy theory you believe in? We're going to discuss conspiracies and conspiracy theories with the masters, Kuhnle and Nathan Radke from the Uncover Up podcast. What's your favorite conspiracy theory? Are you a JFK person? Are you a Princess Diana conspiracy person? How about aliens built the pyramids? Honestly, I might be kind of with you on that one. Conspiracy theories have been a part of our culture forever. They're interesting, right? Sometimes it's fun to think about the potential reasons behind some incident when it's far more likely that all that happened is exactly as it seemed. However, what may have once been a fun topic of conversation at dinner parties has taken over a lot of our social landscape and discourse. Every event that happens now seems to have a million different causes. My feeling is this is a result of the shout economy or the opinion economy that we have today. It's this idea that saying the loudest and wildest stuff gets someone the most traction. It's why you see channels like Fox News consistently pushing false narratives, or you see social media creators yelling about ridiculous things. These narratives get spread quickly. They bring in viewers and followers, and a lot of times a lot of money. So people start to believe these things they're hearing. Mis and disinformation are rampant in our society, and that's pushing the idea of conspiracy theories into the mainstream. And the further these theories spread, the bigger the impact. Kuhnle and Nathan Radke are the hosts of the popular Uncover Up podcast, which explores the strange world of conspiracy theories. After a decade of hosting the show, Lee and Nathan have decided to write a book. It's called Uncover Up: How to Think Clearly in an Age of Conspiracies. It's being released on July 28th. The title is really what drew me in because I am fascinated by how people are so easily pushed into strong opinions about things they really don't know anything about. In our conversation, we talk a lot about how we got here, why it seems so much more difficult today for people to believe the truth, and how the conspiracy theory mindset is having a negative impact on democracy and our lives in general. This ended up being one of my top 5 favorite conversations I've ever had for this podcast, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
I'm trying something new here because as I logged into my computer where I normally record the audio in one place and record the video through Riverside, now my computer is telling me I have an old version of Chrome, which the download is going to take me way too long to do. So we're going to cross our fingers and hope this all comes out okay.
Yeah, Riverside gets very precious about your browser.
Oh my gosh. You know, I will say I love the finished product. I love what they offer you because of what is available with the video and all of that. But I feel like it's such a clunky apparatus to actually use. I don't know if you have the same experience through your work, but...
we use Riverside a lot for media appearances.
Okay.
And so we're kind of used to it now, but...
I just find it so aggravating that when you're on a deadline, that's when you have to do the update.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times. There was one time I had to do an update on, it was coming up to a live TV gig. And like I was seconds away and I made it, I think within 4 seconds. I think I started, I was like sweating, a complete mess.
That's what I've got right now. So hopefully that doesn't show through the video. You know, it's funny. I said to myself, I'm like, okay, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to log in. I'm going to get this plenty of time. I'll be good. Usually I fly by the seat of my pants and just log in right at the end. But I gave myself the time today. And of course, even with that, it's still not. But anyway, I'm wasting your time now as we're talking about this. It's a conspiracy. It's a Google Chrome conspiracy.
Exactly. It's an enshittification conspiracy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that word. I know there's a book with that title that I have to read at some point, but I have not gotten around to it yet. But I cannot wait to see what that's all about. I don't know if you've read that book yet, but
I was just talking to that guy.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
He came to he gave a talk. He's Canadian, actually, but he lives in the States. Yeah.
Well, Lee and Nathan, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. I find the idea of conspiracies and conspiracy theories to be so fascinating. And I just want to get right into it with probably a loaded question to start. But the question is going to be, how do we find ourselves here? How do we find ourselves in a place where it seems like conspiracy theories are more headline news than actual news that we are experiencing in real life?
Well, I mean, in a way, we've always been here. The human being is a conspiratorial animal. Back in like prehistorical days, there was an advantage to the fact that you could kind of look out into your community of, say, cave people and say, you know what? I think Og and Thug might be working together against me. I think they're undermining my position in this cave person society. And so we've always been there. But as you say, there is a difference now in our media ecosystem. And that has changed things pretty dramatically and very quickly, say in the last, say, 2 decades, which for a human being, that is a very quick change, especially a change of that magnitude.
Yeah, I think Nathan's totally right that there is an element to conspiratorial culture that maybe has an evolutionary advantage or certainly has been with us for a really long time. But I think there's also another element to it besides the social media ecosystem, which is really weaponizing and making everything so much more prevalent and powerful. I think there is a relationship between kind of our political sense of how secure and how well we feel that our political system is working when we see it historically kind of track up and down, that there are periods of time when we all are kind of looking at the world thinking to ourselves, oh my goodness, what is going on right now? And that sense of insecurity, uncertainty, feeling out of control leads also into kind of, it is in a sense also a survival strategy where when you're stressed out, you start to notice more patterns that might also be illusory patterns. The way I sometimes explain this to my students, and everybody will have had this experience, of course, is you've made the bad decision to watch a horror movie by yourself at night, and then you hear something in the basement that you got to check out because it could be a leak and destroy your foundation. And as you go down there, let's imagine the lights aren't working. Every rope is a snake and every shadow is a monster or a killer. And I think that tracks also in terms of our kind of societal fear. When we become afraid as a society, we become more conspiratorial. And I think there's so much uncertainty politically around that it does also explain why today, precisely, we are seeing so much more conspiracy stuff in the mainstream as opposed to being more marginal.
I've also wondered, too, if going back to the media thing, if because of how we get our media, through social media and all the different outlets we have, if we're just seeing more of it now, but there's no difference in the amount that we have. Like my wife and I will talk about this because when I grew up, I used to have to walk about a mile to get to my elementary school. So 6 years old, my mom kicked me out the door, said, go to school. I had to walk there and walk back every day. And that wasn't an issue. We all did that. All of us did that. But now the thought of a child walking to school at 6 years old for a mile is like, how dare you? That's child abuse. Why would you let them do that? And there's this fear that there's so many more abductions and crazy people. But statistics will tell you we've never lived in a safer society than we do now. So I just wonder, are we just seeing the amplified crazy things that happen, but there's actually just as much or less of than we used to have? We just see it more. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, I grew up in the 80s in Canada, and of course, in the 80s in Canada, the danger was the unmarked van.
Yes.
There was going to be vans cruising around, and so even though we did walk to and from school by ourselves, we were also constantly on the lookout for stranger danger.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that aspect. But part of the thing is now there's also like an economic aspect to this, because the way social media works is it doesn't matter what the truth is. That's not an advantage in social media. What's an advantage in social media is something that's going to be passed on to more eyes and more ears, which means it's something that is shocking, something that appeals to our preconceived biases and ideas, and also things that generate certain visceral emotions in us. So fear and anger we respond to so instantly, and we're more likely to engage with something that causes us fear or anger. And so there is an economic drive to produce things that cause people to become angry or frightened. I mean, this concept of rage farming. And because it's never further away than arm's length, and because of our notifications, our phones are constantly nudging us. Like, we've become our phone's Tamagotchis. And our phones are constantly attending to us and sort of and feeding us this information, that people are in almost always a high state of alarm. And as Lee was saying earlier, when we're in a high state of alarm, then we do tend to see more patterns as our brains frantically try to figure out what is going on here. How can I protect myself?
Are the conspiracies now, or conspiracy theories, I know you have a very specific definition in your book, but are they more elaborate now than they were before? Like, I was just looking through your podcast and I listened to a couple of episodes over the last couple of weeks, but I just saw one of your more recent ones about the Titanic. And I personally have never heard there was a conspiracy about the Titanic. Like, I kind of thought that was pretty legit. Like, we know the details. There's no real conspiracy here. And I have to go and take a listen to that episode so I can hear more about what it was. But just even seeing the title, I was like, wow, that's interesting. But are we in an era where the conspiracies seem much more elaborate with so many different layers? Like the moon landing, for example, is we never actually went. The flag was waving. There's no air in the moon, yada, yada, yada. But now it's vaccines are putting data chips in your body and they're tracking you through 5G. So have things shifted to the era that we're in now?
Well, one of the discoveries that I've made was how consistent these narratives have been over really large stretches of time. And that was really astounding to me. You mentioned, Jeff, vaccines. It's really interesting. There's a wonderful book called Stuck, and it's about the history of vaccine skepticism. And the author notes that it actually starts in 1880s in Leicester, England. And if you look at the signs that people were walking around with back then, they were saying things like, this vaccine has not been tested enough. There is an ulterior motive to this vaccine. The government might be trying to sterilize us. I mean, a lot of this stuff, with the exception of maybe the microchips, could be updated and seen today in an anti-vax rally. And I was really surprised that the author does an amazing job of then tracking that basically every time that there was a top-down inoculation mandate from the government in response to some kind of, health emergency, there was also a conspiratorial worry that there was really something else going on. Generally, also what we see, to your point about it being maybe more elaborate, is that in conspiracies that are probably not true, and you're right to point out that we have a very unique definition about it, but in conspiracy theories that probably are not true, things like the moon landing and whatever, we get a range of interpretations. It's that the narrative isn't just one kind of conspiracy that everybody agrees on. Different people will have different takes on it. So there'll be a kind of an alien worry about, if we went to the moon, we discovered that there were actually aliens there, and they're the ones who don't want us to go. Or it was a government thing, or it was a secret society thing. And so there's often been layers of various interpretations that have accompanied effectively every major historical event. Like if it was in the news in the last 100, 200 years, there's going to be some sub-genre of people who are like, oh, no, there is something else going on here. And what's really amazing is occasionally they're actually right.
Sure.
Which is not often how we tend to think about conspiracy theories in popular culture.
Yeah, we talk about that here in America right now because there's a lot of things coming out of Washington, D.C. where, it seems outrageous and a lot of us don't necessarily agree with it, but a lot of them are based in some sort of fact or some sort of fear that gets people riled up, like the Kennedy Maha movement that we have here. Yeah, sure, we all want our kids to be healthier. We all want to eat better things, but the way they're taking that and twisting it is not actually benefiting any, you know what I mean? So they take a certain thing, and I feel like conspiracy theories are the same thing. It's like, here's something that, okay, we can kind of all get behind, but now we're going to turn it just a little bit and see where we can go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're frequently drawn from real issues, from real problems, from real threats and dangers. The problem is then the opportunistic scammers come in. Mm-hmm. And they oversimplify the problem because all of the things that we're worried about, say health, the solution to the health crisis is going to be unbelievably complicated because the causes of it are unbelievably complicated. Some of them are socioeconomic. Some of them are going to be environmental. Some of them are going to be biological. But what happens is in that fear, in that condition that's created, you get these opportunists that can sneak in and they appeal to our laziness in a sense because it's always easier to think about a simple problem with a simple solution. So they ignore concepts of causality and they confuse correlation with causality. And then the next thing you know, we're being told that Tylenol is causing autism. And of course, if you look at the actual studies, that's absurd. Mm-hmm. Like that doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. But it does appeal to our poor brains, which are just so overloaded at this point, which are just bombarded constantly with threats. And so when somebody says, hey, we figured this out, and here's this one thing that you can do. And you see this in clickbait headlines all the time. This one shocking truth that you need to find out that's going to change everything. And that's simply, unfortunately, not how the world works. But it is frequently how the conspirasphere works, which is, I think an underrated part of conspiracy theory, the degree to which the scammers and the manipulators take advantage of real fears to push nonsense solutions.
I agree with everything that Nathan has just said, and that's why we work well together. But I was going to maybe just add a little bit on the other side of the argument, as it were, which is that sometimes these kind of bizarre conspiracy theories, as you both said, they have a kernel of truth to them, but sometimes that truth is actually, it leads very logically to the conspiracy that we're engaging with. So, for example, there was a really successful disinformation campaign that was started by the KGB back in the early 80s, that it was actually the CIA that had, or some kind of, part of the American government that had actually bioengineered HIV/AIDS. Now, that was a disinformation campaign. It was obviously not true. But if you knew about things like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, which was something like a 20-year-long study, which
Even
targeted, yeah, even longer, which targeted African American men specifically. They were given syphilis under false pretenses. I think they were told that they were getting vitamin shots or something like that, left untreated, just, to see what would happen. And there have been other examples, completely not made up examples of the American government doing kind of biological experiments on unsuspecting civilians, often in marginal communities. And so if you grow up knowing that history, something like that disinformation campaign starts to seem less bizarre than it does to the rest of us. I'm a sort of middle class white guy whose life and whose family's life has been super fine. I haven't been the victim of this kind of stuff, and I hadn't heard about this. Like, my background is political science, political history. Nobody ever taught me this kind of stuff. So when I encountered conspiracy theories like that, I would just dismiss it out of hand. I'm like, that's just ridiculous. And while in this particular case, the conspiracy theory wasn't true, if you know about stuff like Tuskegee or MK Ultra or some of the other things,
Sea-spray.
sea spray, then you're like, oh, maybe this is in fact happening.
Sure. There's so many different directions that I could go here, but I want to go back to where my thought was, and it follows up, but it's this kernel of truth. I don't know if you guys saw this article. I don't remember how long ago it was, maybe a month or two ago, about 62 million men being involved in some sort of online chat room sort of school about how to abuse their wives and take advantage, like drugging their wives and taking advantage. And if you want to go down the rabbit hole and look it up, you can. But what I just found out, I mean, I saw this, everybody was talking about it. Can you believe 62 million men? And it's a horrifying statistic, right? You think about that. That's a lot of people. That's a really big chunk of people. But when you actually look at the real article where it came from, it was talking about a pornographic website that had 62 million hits, which you can't tell if they're all men or women or who. You can't tell how many of them were repeat customers. So it might not have actually been 62 million people. And yes, there was a chat room where people were saying horrifying things, but there weren't 62 million people saying horrifying things. And I think, to go back to what you were saying, it's this nugget of truth that you can pull out that makes a headline that then gets you riled up and then gets people going. And that's kind of the nature of the world that we're in, where this information spreads real fast if there isn't someone to stop it. And even stopping it can be almost impossible.
We've noticed this a number of times when we've looked at the kind of the source of information, often when it's quite technical, like when it's something like what physicists, now I'm going to get myself into some hot water if you've got physicists listening, because I'm really outside my area.
I love to think there are smart people like physicists listening, so please keep it up. I love this.
Well, even most people will know more than I, but we've taken a look at this in a number of different examples, and this is just a sort of a devolution of the headline, which starts out very sober and starts out really evidence-based. And so one great example comes from we all live in a simulation.
Yes.
This is not the real world. The physicists, I've seen headlines. I think there was a Wired magazine headline, something along the lines of, physicists have proven that we live in a simulation. Okay. Now, that of course is like, well, who made the simulation? Maybe it's aliens, or maybe it's, super beings of some sort. But when you go back to the original sources, their physicists are talking about a mathematical fix for something, multiverse, whatever kind of stuff that they're dealing with. And they use this term hologram. Now, hologram it wasn't a simulation. It was something very technical, mathy, in this physics theory about how the universe might work. And you could see the evolution of people repeating that initial claim, and it got more and more outrageous, and it got more and more kind of conspiratorial until the time it becomes clickbait, at which point the entire argument that it originally started with has been lost, and all that is retained is physicists have proven that we live in a simulation. So I think there is, again, back to Nathan's earlier point about a kind of an economics that drives this kind of stuff, where who is actually like, clicking on the physics paper to do the hard math to really understand what they're talking about? No, way cooler is, wait a minute, my world is an illusion. Wait till I tell my friends.
Well, there's so many things too. Like, I want to shift a little bit because we were talking in your book, you referenced smoking quite a few times, and how, I mean, the cigarette industry, tobacco industry lied to us for many, many years about the dangers of smoking. But there is a conspiracy that I've heard some people talk about. I guess you would call it a conspiracy, where they would say it's hard to determine if cigarette smoking actually causes cancer because, in theory, a person who chooses to smoke is likely to take on other dangerous activities. So you can't actually tie the cancer to the smoking. It could be the result of many other things. I'm like, but there's science, y'all. Like, we've looked at this, we've studied this, and we know that there are cancer-causing carcinogens inside the cigarette.
I mean, there's science, but there's also the way that we have to communicate, which is through language. And language is an amazing tool, but it's a flawed tool. And so we have a word like cause, but cause means a bunch of different things. And actually, I was dating a woman years ago whose father despised me, and he used to throw me out of a lot of family gatherings because we get into arguments. And we were over there for Thanksgiving. I had eaten beforehand, assuming I was going to get thrown out. And he started talking about how smoking didn't cause cancer. And I said, okay, like, let's have it. And he said, well, I smoke and I don't have cancer. And I was like, oh, that's magnificent. Bravo. And he said, and there's people who have cancer that don't smoke. I said, again, this is fantastic stuff. And so then his argument was that the whole thing was a scam by, I think, the Nicorette Gum Company in order to sell more Nicorette gum. And I said, well, the problem is that you're using this word cause, but actually cause means a bunch of different things. And we have a whole chapter on this in the book. Mm-hmm. Because you can have something like a sufficient cause, which means that this will guarantee that this other thing happens. And yes, smoking is not sufficient to cause cancer. You're not going to get cancer as soon as you smoke a cigarette. Or there is necessary cause, that you have to do this in order for something to happen. And yeah, people don't smoke, but do get cancer. But there's that third one, contributory cause. And if you took all the smokers and all the non-smokers, you put them into separate groups, you would take into account diet and age and stuff, you would see that there was way more cancer amongst the smokers. But that's not as clean and clear as we would like it to be. And we want things to be kind of binary, yes, no, on, off, where what actually happens in the world is things are kind of a complicated mess, especially when you're looking into things like causality. And because conspiracy theories are ultimately all about causality, this secret conspiracy caused this event, we have to pay really close attention to the way that we use language and the way that we understand concepts like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can totally understand why someone might get roped into a conspiracy theory, right? Because they are, like you just said, they are looking for the simplest answer, and the simplest answer might be A plus B equals C. That's it. I think you use X, Y in your book to describe that. So I understand that. I get that. Like someone like this person, your potential father-in-law, can say, I smoke, I don't have cancer, cigarettes don't cause cancer. But then you still have so many people that go off the rails in conspiracy theories. Like that one I can understand, but then it's the evil cabal of people that are sucking blood out of children so they can live longer. How do we get like from one step to the other? Like it seems like an outrageous shift in the mindset of some folks.
I think one of the missing elements that I really needed to learn in this entire project was the role of emotion and also the role of just being the victim of a lot of bad social things that are happening. And so that sometimes when we encounter somebody who has a really bizarre and outrageous idea or belief, that belief is doing something for them. It is fixing something in their life that is otherwise going wrong. And so when we look at, like, say, for example, there was with the whole COVID lockdown and the booster shots and the vaccine, there was a grift that emerged about this thing called colloidal silver. Now, just to be clear, That stuff is poison and it does not help. But the claim
And it turns
was,
your skin blue.
yes, and that. The claim was, though, that this was going to both cure and prevent COVID. Now, who would this appeal to, right? There's a lot of people who live in healthcare deserts. There's a lot of people who, for whatever socioeconomic background, have some crummy jalopy that's probably not going to start. They got to get into that thing to drive 3 hours to get to the closest hospital to get this booster that doesn't even make any sense, right? A lot of medical language is really geared to people with, basically university education. This stuff is not comprehensible all the time to everybody. And so it feels hard and it's difficult and scary. And then there's this solution that comes right at your doorstep, literally. Like, we will deliver the solution to your problem to your house. And all you need to do is believe it, And so there is an emotional component to our ideologies and to our beliefs that really certainly helps me understand why some of these ideas that seem so outrageous to the rest of us are plausible to some people. Not only do they have a background in, hey, I'm getting screwed over in all these different ways by politicians, by the police, by the unfairness of society. This is just one other thing that is being done to me. I know this is like, it's hard to go even from this to there's a secret society that's sucking the blood of children and stuff, but once that door is opened, and once the other thing, sorry, this seems contradictory, but it's part of the same narrative. One of the other things that we notice is that conspiratorial societies tend to be very welcoming. They tend to be really affirming, and they tend to also provide solutions, actual solutions to the problems that you're facing, that your doctor isn't going to give you, your cops aren't going to give you, your lawyers aren't going to give you. And so this is, I think, the entry point for me to understand why some of these ideas really take hold. And once you're there, you're in a kind of an echo chamber, you're in a feedback loop, and you've got friends, and they are supporting you. And then slowly, the boiling the frog analogy, you're getting into hotter and hotter water, but it all kind of fits together and it all makes sense.
And meanwhile, your algorithms are going to be driving you to more and more extreme content.
Yeah, it's an in-group, out-group kind of conversation. You mentioned in the book about how a lot of conspiracies nowadays are also tied to, I don't want to say political beliefs because it's not necessarily politics, but politics will put you into a group of people. And we think about the rage that we see from some folks here in America, especially at this moment. I'm sure Canada's also dealing with some of this in their own way as well. But we see some of that where they have to double down and they have to go along with it, because if they even admit a fraction of it isn't true, then their whole life becomes a lie. Their whole identity becomes a lie. And I do feel sympathy for those folks in that position, because I would hate to be in that spot too, where I have to sit down and go, wow, I've really just wasted the last 5 years of my life thinking this one thing, but it's, I don't know, it's also sad to see them go down a rabbit hole just to have a friend, that also breaks my heart.
Well, this is part of the sunk cost fallacy. You have so much invested in this theory. It's become so much a part of your own identity and also your community. And there's a good chance that it has cost you. It has cost you family and friends.
Sure.
I bet everybody listening knows somebody that went too far off in some kind of conspiracy rabbit hole, and it might have hurt their professional life. It definitely hurt their personal life. It might have hurt their family life. And so at that point, it has cost you so much. It has to be true, because otherwise it's very difficult to confront. And I think one of the things that we need to do as a society is that we need to valorize being wrong and admitting that you're wrong and changing your mind. We have this idea that if you're steadfast and you never change your mind about anything, that makes you stronger somehow. But of course, that actually makes you weak and vulnerable, because the second you are convinced that you know the one true answer, you stop listening to new evidence. Being open-minded doesn't mean that you just believe any old thing that comes by. Being open-minded means that you're willing to listen to good new evidence and change what you think.
You reference in the book, going back many years, when President Obama was running for office and the conspiracy came out that he wasn't born in America. And that is the perfect example of what you just said. Because when he actually did show the proof of birth from Hawaii, it was, oh, well, that's not the right proof of birth. Or, oh, look at that signature. That doesn't look right. Like, it's just the constant, I cannot admit that I might have been wrong. I cannot admit and say, you know what? okay, I listened to the wrong person. He was born here. I don't have to like him. I can still not like the guy, but I can openly say he was actually born. It's the, again, in America, it's the election in 2020. Like the president is still going up on stages right now talking about how he was screwed. And like it has been proven time and time again that it wasn't, but he cannot possibly admit that, you know what, my facts were wrong. I got it wrong. Whatever, we're moving forward. It's such a fascinating aspect of life right now where people are so scared to admit any sort of fault at all. My favorite thing is to say, you're right. Yep. You know what? Because I just learned something. Like that's kind of the whole, I don't want to say it's the whole basis of this podcast that I do, but I call the show Adult Education because I still want to learn as an adult. Like I hate that when you graduate from college, if you're not going on to more education, you're essentially done learning. Like you just don't have to learn anymore after you're 22-ish years old. I want to keep learning. So tell me I'm wrong so I can grow. And so many people just don't want to do that.
Yeah. Look, you're absolutely right. And I think that is a wonderful disposition. It's something that when I see my students, I really try and aspire to it. I know Nathan does as well. We try and follow the evidence. And we are in a community where we're lucky enough to be in a place where if we are wrong, that's okay. But I think Vice magazine did this ages ago where they followed around neo-Nazi recruiters. And this was always a question for me. So Nathan and I are in Toronto. It's a very multicultural place. You have a lot of exposure to a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people, both in power, not in power. And so it seems like one of the most bizarre places to try and recruit to this kind of ideology. And of course, you do see them occasionally, right? And I'm like, what is going on there? And I'm sorry if it wasn't Vice. It's just an example I'm pulling off the top of my head right now. But it was really fascinating how that recruitment worked. So what they did was they sent some older guys to high school with the job of finding the loners. Like, look for the kids who aren't doing well. Look for the guys who don't have friends. You're never going to get like the head football guy with the girlfriend and all of that kind of stuff. And then it doesn't start with ideology. It's stuff like, hey, man, here's some music. And oh, by the way, we have a party Friday night. Do you want to come? And then at that party, you get introduced to friends, right? You get introduced to people who are going to take care of you. You maybe, if you're a hetero guy, you get to meet some girls. This is the kind of thing you wanted in high school, and everybody's making fun of you, and now you have friends. Now you have a community. Now you have that thing that you wanted so desperately, and all that you need to do at this point is pay lip service. You don't even need to actually believe it. You need to just pay lip service to some ideology. It's like, okay, you want me to say this or believe that? Sure, whatever. And that was a real insight, into how these ideas actually trap us. Because for this person to admit they're wrong, which they are, obviously, right? I don't need to tell either of you guys or your listeners. But for that person to admit they're wrong, they got to leave their community. They got to leave their friends. It's not just about owning up to a mistake in your own kind of thought process. This is about exiting everything that you wanted. And I think this is a dimension that I never really took that seriously before I got into this work. And I think that's also why when we talk to people who believe things that are so far from what we believe, it doesn't really work to engage in facts, annoyingly. It's just like the facts just bounce off because it's not about that. It's about something much more deep. And maybe I should have started with the pithy version. If you had to choose between friends and being right, I think a lot of us would choose friends.
Sure. You've used the word obviously a couple of times, and it was something that was burned into my brain early on in radio broadcasting that you can't say obviously on the air because not everybody is going to agree with what you say. No.
Thank you for teaching me that.
I'm not criticizing. No, but I think it's a good point because I had an interview with a woman a couple of years ago. She wrote a book about inspiring critical thinking in children, trying to make sure our children are critical thinking. And I don't like that phrase anymore because I feel like the term critical thinking, while it is a valuable thing, has been turned into a dirty word because I think conspiracy theorists have capitalized on the idea of critical thinking. But I said to her at one point, I said, okay, her idea was essentially a lot of let your kids ask questions, go along with it, let them think it through. But I said, at what point do you stop it and just go, no, Susan, the earth is not flat. Like, we know this to be fact. It is just round, deal with it, let's move on. And I think there is a way with the word obviously. even though there are things that should be obvious, for some reason to millions of people around the world, they're just not obvious. And I can't seem to wrap my head around where we went wrong and where the timeline diverged, where things like, you know, flat earth and like where that changed and people are just like, yeah, no, I don't think it's real anymore. Like I don't know how that happened.
Well, I mean, I've spent a lot of time with flat earthers and had a lot of conversations. Sometimes
So
I'll
sorry.
bring them to the sometimes I'll bring them to the lake and say, look, a horizon. And then how can that be explained? And there is something great about asking questions. We should be asking questions. Sure. We should be asking questions of power. We should be asking questions about structure and the way our society is organized. Some conspiracies are real. Some of those conspiracies affect people in an adverse way. But there's another half to that that I think doesn't get as much attention. We should be congratulated for asking questions. We also need to listen to answers, because people might have questions about the flat earth and say, oh, why does it look flat? Sure, great question. You can ask that. But there is an answer to it. And the answer to all the flat earth stuff, the answer tends to be, well, the thing is the earth is really, really, really big. And we're really, really small. And so a lot of the questions are answered by that. But it's really important that we are willing to listen to the answers. And when the answer answers our question, we don't try to protect the question. We try to understand the answer. And unfortunately, what we tend to do is we tend to protect the questions that we have as opposed to exposing them to the answers that maybe they need.
And ideologies have a certain inbuilt resilience that also makes sense. You and I have it as well. We don't change our mind every day. Even if you get some new evidence, let's say I were to give you some evidence about the moon landing being faked, you're not immediately going to change your mind. You are still going to stick to some kind of base principles. I often find this stuff is a lot easier to notice in other people, right, than it is to notice in ourselves.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the things that we're noticing in these kind of bizarre conspiratorial cultures are expressions of things that we ourselves are doing as well. And there is an inbuilt resilience to some of these ideas that, I mean, of course, Nathan is totally right. Like at some point, and so are you, Jeff, like at some point, the evidence is so overwhelming that it probably makes sense to change your mind. And yet it's not the kind of, it's also quite scary, which is also worth noting. I mean, there are some people like you, Jeff, I think, who's fallen in love with that notion. I certainly have. They've fallen in love with that notion that maybe the world is bigger and more interesting than I thought. And discovering that I was wrong about something exposes me to an entirely new vista. You know, it's like this, it's like leveling up in a video game. You're in a new level. There's all this new stuff to explore. But I think there can also be a counter experience to that, which is one of it being very threatening and being very scary. And I think that inbuilt resilience sort of, you know, is something hard to combat.
Lee, I was going to ask you a question.
Oh.
Because,
Wait, whose show is this, Nathan? What's going on?
This is the problem. This is the problem when you have podcasters on your podcast.
I love
I
it.
forget whose podcast it is. But Lee, what is an example of a conspiracy that you've gone back and forth on?
Well, the Kennedy assassination is one of those where before I looked into it, I was like, come on, straightforward, right? And now, look, I don't buy in, just for your listeners, you know, we have a book to plug. I'm not saying I buy a lot of the more outrageous stuff. But I also was one where I was like, every time I tried to make sense of it, there was another piece of information that kind of dissuaded me. You know, can you actually fire 3 shots in that way? Okay, now I think I have come to a resolution in myself, and it will not shock anybody. It was Lee Harvey Oswald, and he did assassinate JFK, and there was no involvement of the CIA or FBI. But it was one where it was much harder to come to a resolution for me. The more I looked into it, the more there was this disconfirming evidence that kept kind of being a needle in my side that I couldn't get rid of.
Nathan, same question for you. Yeah, turn this around.
Yeah, exactly. Since we're taking over the show.
Oh, please.
Well, I would say, this isn't necessarily one that viewers are going to have heard of, and so I'll do a bit of an explanation. But I would say it's Pont Saint-Esprit. So a little French town in the early 1950s, where everyone in the town kind of goes mad. And people are jumping out of buildings, and they're tearing at their flesh, and they're talking about demons and snakes and fire. And the whole town sort of goes mad for a little while, and then a few days later they recover from it. And the official explanation is bad bread. They got a hold of some bad bread. I mean, they are a French town. They're going to be eating bread. But another explanation is maybe the CIA was doing mind control experiments on that little French town. And that sounds absurd at first, but of course, in the early 1950s, the CIA had a number of mind control experiments going on, including Artichoke and Bluebird, and those were wildly unethical, and they were doing them without consent on people. And so the question, could the CIA have been doing mind control experiments on a small little French town in the early 50s, as ridiculous as that sounds? The answer is, yeah, maybe. And so that's one where sometimes I'm like, no, it was the bread. It was ergot that was contaminating the bread. And then sometimes I'm like, yeah, but this CIA scientist was in France at the time. And this CIA file that I came across was talking about their interest in weaponizing ergot. I think that's one of the ones where I'm actually still 50-50. Like, I do not know the answer to that. And so all I can do is to try to keep gathering information and keep trying to figure out, like, what is the solution here? I guarantee you, I probably die before coming to the answer.
Well, I think there's a healthy dose of skepticism that if you live life with that, right? Like, I think it's not, you're not questioning everything, but when things that are bizarre and strange and don't seem right happen, you can accept the truth that you find, but you can also go, yeah, but there might be something else. But there's a difference between a healthy dose of skepticism and storming the Capitol because you believe something. You know what I mean? Like there's a line there, and there is a difference. Like, I think there's a lot of things like Kennedy or even the 9/11 stuff. Like, sure, there is some interesting facts that have been brought forth that you're like, I could see where some of this, like you talked about Pearl Harbor in the book. You mentioned that about how there's this conspiracy that has been proven to be untrue, that the American government knew it was coming and they said, let it happen because we need an excuse to get into the war. I mean, there's kind of some truth that could come from that, right? Like, it's believable to think that. I don't think the U.S. government would have put all those soldiers in danger that way. I don't believe that to be true, but I can understand where the conspiracy comes from, and that's that healthy dose of skepticism. But again, like I said, there's that line between the skepticism and just like, we're rallying the troops and like, that's where you got to be careful with the conspiracy theories, I think.
Now, you mentioned Pearl Harbor, which is a conspiracy, a false flag conspiracy, which
Yes.
you rightly note is not true. But then there's the Bay of Tonkin.
Right.
And that is one that massively expands the Vietnam War, and the Pentagon admitted that this did not happen. So the USS Maddox, it's in 1964, the Bay of Tonkin is shelled by North Vietnamese, and that incident apparently was not real, but furnished the stage for expanding a very unpopular war. And this is the problem. The two are actually not that different from each other. And so then when you try and use historical precedent to come to something like 9/11, you've got two examples, one which was not true and one which maybe is true, or is true. And and it's you're right. It's outrageous to think that the American government would put their own soldiers or civilians and for that matter, of course, other civilians in that kind of jeopardy. And when you discover that at least it happened one time, then it becomes what I call the gateway conspiracy. There used to be that theory, of course, that marijuana was the gateway drug. That's been debunked. But I think there are gateway conspiracies. I think there are conspiracies of real government actions that when you discover Tuskegee, MKUltra, Bay of Tonkin, some other things, you're like, okay, I'm listening. This indeed, there might be more here than I was led to believe.
I mean, if all you knew about the American government was what they did in Cuba in the 60s,
Right.
that you would think, well, this government will do anything then.
Sure.
Right.
Because some of those plans were so absurd, including something like Northwoods, which was never ever actually enacted. But Northwoods was a proposed plan in which you would do false flags and attack your own interests and then blame Cuba. And when you look at what happened in Guatemala, and when you look at what happened in so many other places, it all becomes so much more believable. It's sort of that danger. You don't want to tip over from skepticism into paranoia. And that's the danger. That's the moment.
Paranoia is the word I was looking for earlier, and I could not come with it. So thank you, Nathan, for using that. I'll wrap this up with one sort of, I don't know if this is the right question to end with, but we've talked about the word conspiracy a lot, but we're actually talking about things that really did happen, like Tuskegee and things. At what point does a conspiracy no longer become a conspiracy and just become history?
Well, this is the tricky bit, because a conspiracy just means a group of people secretly conspiring. And so if somebody's planning a surprise birthday party for you, technically that's a conspiracy.
Sons of bitches.
So it's this distinction between conspiracy theory and conspiracy. And Lee wrote quite a bit about this in the book.
Well, and what we're trying to do is neutralize the concept, because what happens in popular culture is conspiracy theory is used as a put down, and it's used as a way to not listen to people who believe things that are different from us, despite the fact that sometimes they have some really interesting evidence, and sometimes they're actually talking about things that really happened. And so we wanted to use the term theory the way it's used in the social sciences or natural sciences. When a natural scientist talks about the theory of gravity, it's not like, oh, it's a guess, we don't know. The theory of evolution, is my understanding, has been one of the things that has been like most tested. You know, it has been most theorized. And so their use of the term theory is a story that connects the facts under investigation in some logical way. And a conspiracy theory is just that. You look at the world and then you assume, maybe correctly, based on the evidence, that there are people behind the scenes doing something in secret for their own gain against the public good. And it's just a story that connects the facts. And sometimes there's a lot of evidence to support that, and sometimes there isn't. And by trying to take conspiracy out of the realm of just, oh, you're a tinfoil hatter and you're, I'm not going to listen to you and ha, 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 and really kind of look at the evidence, take it away from the people, just look at the evidence. We tried to neutralize the term that way to say, yeah, all conspiracy theories are conspiracy theories, whether they are proven true or not. The historical ones, as much as the like lizards in Denver airport, ruling the world, they're all conspiracy theories. Some are more plausible than others. Some have better evidence than others. And so some should probably be believed and others should be dismissed.
Well, guys, this has been a fascinating conversation. The book is incredible. I find I'm learning so much about American history through Canadians lately. I don't know if you guys are avid TikTok users, but there is a woman, I'm not 100% on the pronouns, that goes by Unlearn16 on TikTok. And she does these really elaborate like education lessons. And they generally all tend to be about American history. And I'm like, wow, this is more I'm learning in a 5-minute TikTok video than I had in my entire world history class in high school. But I feel like the Canadians are really educating me lately.
Cool.
Well, I mean, there's something about being a neighbor that I think makes you think, I need to know what's going on over there.
Yeah, best to understand it, right? Yeah. Well, the book is called Uncover Up, How to Think Clearly in an Age of Conspiracies. Lee Kuhnle and Nathan Radke, thank you both so much for your time. Where do people go if they want to learn more about you guys? I know you got the podcast. Let's promote our stuff here.
Nathan, you want to go promoting?
Well, the name of the podcast is Uncover Up. If you do a search in any kind of free podcast app for Uncover Up Conspiracy Podcast, it'll pop up. We've also been doing more videos lately. Also, Uncover Up on YouTube.
I'm a bit shy on the video front, so I'm not always there.
Okay, it's not my favorite thing either, so I get it.
It is very difficult to get used to seeing your face. Because normally only other people have to see your face.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, we're on Instagram at The Uncover Up. Basically, The Uncover Up. We've dominated that particular.
It's annoyingly, it is also some kind of foundation makeup thing. So you have to maybe add conspiracy,
and then you're in the clear.
And you will get it,
but not in the clear skin.
Yeah, search Uncover Up Conspiracy, and you will get there. Well, guys, seriously, thank you so much for your time. I really have enjoyed this book. I've just enjoyed the conversation too. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss with people. So I appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. It's been tons of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Nice to meet you.
Big thank you to Lee Kuhnle and Nathan Radke for their time today. Their book, Uncover Up, How to Think Clearly in an Age of Conspiracy, comes out on July 28th via ECW Press. I hope you check it out, and I hope you have as much fun with it as I did. And thank you to all of you for listening to this episode of the Adult Education Podcast. Until next time, be well.